Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. And the name of the game is to win, Lauren. It doesn't matter how you do it. You can look across the ACC and see some really strange results or really strange ways of winning. It doesn't matter. Just get the W. You saw that with Pitt, Georgia Tech suddenly in the coastal mix, and obviously with North Carolina and NC State. Some fans might be bothered by how those games played out, but it doesn't matter if the win is the win.
Yeah, probably State fans maybe a little more so than Carolina fans because at the end of the day, their defense was able to get a stop, and I don't think that's anything that was expected necessarily going into that final drive. I know I didn't necessarily expect it based on how things have been playing out. But let's be real, too. I tweeted it last night. I stand by it. Florida State, NC State, that game was coastal AF. Like that game, let's be real, because it was super weird. We saw things we had never seen before and didn't think were possible. It was a wild game, and it was kind of filled with, oh, you made a mistake, now I'm going to make a mistake. And what is everyone doing here? It was completely coastal energy, but they got
it's coastal energy, and what's funny is how rivals look at the other school and are like, man, you get all the breaks, while not looking at the actual breaks that you have. So let's start with North Carolina and then NC State and some of the weirdness that we've seen in this era of ACC football. Let me pull up the screen here and say hello to our friend from the ACC network, Brian Ives, who had this wild stat that North Carolina is now 15-11 all time against Miami, the only ACC program with a winning record against the Hurricanes. Only Notre Dame has a better record against Miami all time. Like, when you look at schools that North Carolina has beaten more consistently. You know what? I need more coffee, Lauren.
You're coastally right now. I get it.
Very coastally. Consistently is Duke, okay? Yes. Miami and Duke, essentially the same to North Carolina in this expanded era.
Yeah. No, since Miami joined the league, because I calculated it, they have 11 wins against Miami. They have 13 ACC wins. They have 13 ACC wins against Duke. The most they have against anybody else is 9. That's it.
Cannot explain it. I'll say this about the game itself. Because I saw you tweeted earlier when they didn't go for the field goal and they were being aggressive. And the aggressiveness eventually paid off on a fourth down that got converted into a first down, which they ended up turning into a touchdown and a 14-point lead. And I tweeted this out when it happened before halftime, right before they had a classic, bad ending to the half, similar to Notre Dame, and things got off the rails for them. If you know your defense is still not, they can be all confident, and they're talking up the defense the best they can. I know Mac Brown did it after the game. But if you know that defense can still be bad or have moments where things are going to get away from you, you have to take the opportunities to get touchdowns, not 3 points. Yep. Touchdowns. And I think the coaching staff gets it aggressively, and I had no problems with the way they played that game out.
Yeah, I think part of it maybe too was you could be a little revisionist, when it kind of seemed to get away from them a little bit after that, and they kind of lost momentum, however you want to quantify that. But to me, I didn't think it was the great decision for a lot of reasons. But when Miami essentially did the same thing in a situation that made far less sense, because Miami, their goal line offense was terrible. Mm-hmm. They weren't able to run the football. And so for them to not take 3 points in that situation when they hadn't really been moving the ball that well made no sense to me. So that kind of canceled it out for me, honestly, at that point.
See, I think it made sense. I think Mario Cristobal understood two things. One, their offense hasn't really gotten off the ground, and if Tyler Van Dyke can get some sort of
the get momentum, right happened.
What's that?
The get right, though.
It is. Well, North Carolina's position is a get right, and there were some moments there where it looked like Tyler Van Dyke and the crew were actually going to get right against the Tar Heels. So if
they did, even though they lost.
Yeah, I was going to say that it got away from them there at the end, too. Because, again, Carolina had some decent goal line stands. My point is, both teams understood that touchdowns were the only thing that were going to get it done. 3 points were going to get it done. So I appreciated the aggressiveness on both ends of the ball. And the reason why I was still optimistic about North Carolina winning the Coastal Division after the embarrassing loss to Notre Dame, where they just got beat up front, is that when you looked at the rest of the league, you're not really seeing anybody that can challenge North Carolina the same way that Notre Dame did on the line. So if they can just keep it going, stay aggressive, they're going to find themselves winning the Coastal. I mean, I am still of the opinion that they're going to win the Coastal. The Duke game coming up next week is going to be interesting. But
Yeah.
one other, and this actually gets into the weirdness of it all and how things have all kind of played out. I want to bring up this meme from our friend Andrew Bachelor.
I'm so glad you're doing this.
I think he's protected, but I don't think he's going to mind if I pull this meme because as he points out, the Brian Ives tweet of UNC is 15-11 versus Miami, second best all time versus Miami, meaning me in 2004. Awesome. So UNC is a national powerhouse in football, and it's the Anakin Padme meme, and obviously Anakin just stares blankly because we all know that North Carolina still hasn't figured it out consistently enough.
Florida State or NC State fans have a similar meme too. They have a weird thing with the state of Florida schools. Those two do that are in their division. It is kind of nonsensical.
Shout out to our friend James Curl who pointed out, imagine showing this tweet to a state fan in 1999, then imagining explaining Twitter to them, and then imagining what a smartphone is. This is from Corey Smith over at Pack Broad, that NC State now has 5 of 6 against Florida State and 3 straight at home. This is not the ACC that John Swofford envisioned in the early 2000s.
No, and it's just funny to me too because like you look at Carolina's record against various coastal teams, like Miami, they have the longest streak against of any ACC team, 4 in a row. Mm-hmm. They don't have 4 in a row against anyone else in the league, obviously, and they're 1-3 in their last 4 against Georgia Tech and Virginia. They're actually 2-2 against the Hokies in the last 4. And that's a team they've really struggled with. They're 5-13 against Virginia Tech since they joined the league, and they're 11 and I think they're like 11-5 against Miami. Make it make sense. I can't.
Now, speaking of NC State fans, ye of little faith. Gilio and I did the curse reverse candle, and the metaphysical does not always play out the way you logically think it's going to play out. This is where logic does not apply, and you just have to believe in the metaphysical aspects of what you're trying to do. And we did the curse reverse candle, and people were convinced that all the candle was used up in the ECU game, where they missed 2 field goals at the end, and NC State escapes Greenville with a win. Last night, against Florida State, the way things started out early, where NC State's offense just could not get anything going, and NC State's defense was uncharacteristically inconsistent against Florida State's offense.
It's a tricky team to play against.
They are a tricky team to play, but we know NC State's defense is their bread and butter. And I don't think, and clearly the coaching staff felt this way because they must have lit a fire under their ass because in the second half, NC State's defense played the way that you expect NC State's defense to play.
Yeah, and it gave, credit to them they adjusted. Yeah.
This is where complementary football comes into play, and it looked like NC State could kind of do the thing that you and I have been talking about all season. Game control and just do enough offensively to get through.
I have never, nor will I ever say the words game control in a serious way, but I hear you. Yes.
I know. And let Dunn kick the field goals, and he was really, really good.
I will say, though, at the end of the half, when FSU's kicker, who has had the yips like nothing I've ever seen, when he made a 47-yard field goal going into half, I started to wonder if the candle had lost its impact because I'm like, what? That dude couldn't even make extra points.
Don't question the candles. Don't question the candles. These were lit last night while I was watching the game. Do not question them because it played out in the end. I'll explain why. You're right. Florida State's kicker has had issues all season long. And clearly Mike Norvell was still skittish about that at the end of the game where all they needed was a field goal. All they needed was a field goal to win.
Yes.
And instead, Jordan Travis. I always mix his 2 first names up.
Jordan Travis
decides in that moment, rather than putting themselves in position to just simply get a kick and get the hell out of Carter Finley Stadium, throws up a 50-50 ball, which they had won some that night, but it was a bad throw, which resulted in interception, and NC State wins that game.
Well, they had another guy in a one-on-one matchup. I know FSU fans, because most FSU fans I've seen do understand why he did it. Like, they've watched this kicker all year. I know it seems insane to most people that haven't watched Florida State games all year.
I totally got where they were coming from. I'm with you on that. I totally understood where Norvell was coming from.
And they liked the aggressiveness, too. But at the end of the day, Travis probably just made the wrong call there. Mm-hmm. Like, he probably just should have thrown to the guy in one-on-one coverage instead of the other guy. Or, some Florida State fans were saying, because I think they still had timeouts, like maybe you just take something a little shorter and just try to get closer and then settle for a field goal. They knew they weren't going to try one from there. So maybe you try to take something underneath a little bit so you can at least get your guy closer and then try it, because he had made the 47-yarder. So, it's not the same kinds of criticism that other people have for the move necessarily, because I think they know their team a little bit better, than those of us watching from the outside and thinking that team is insane.
So about that, and this is where, to shift to NC State's coaching staff, where Norvell understands they have a kicker who's a little iffy. Given what we had seen earlier in the day from Dunn, who hit a 53-yarder, I was confused by Dave Doran's decision to punt there late rather than kick another field goal. And, the idea being, well, you pin them back.
Well, and if you miss it, they're basically at midfield, and all they need is a field goal to beat you.
Yes, I get all that. But you still gambled with a Florida State defense that had been able to move the ball on you at points in this game. And I get that you trust the defense and the way things have been going in the second half. But I also would trust my kicker, who's been getting it done for you all night. And the defense and the kicking won you the game. Straight up, it won you the game. So why not let the kicker have another opportunity to win you the game? They were fortunate. They were fortunate to have that play out the way that it did, with the decision to punt in that situation, with the delay game and everything else. It was an interesting decision because there was still plenty of time when that all happened.
Right.
But it's fine. Now, on one hand, I can question the coaching staff in that regard. It's cool. I haven't read the comments this morning from Dave Doran, so I don't know what this is just based on what we saw last night. I haven't read Dave Doran's post-game press conference from last night because I went to bed. I was tired. On the other hand, I'll give the coaching staff a lot of credit with how they switch things up with Devin Leary being hurt. Because this is the other issue that NC State is going to have to be wary of for the rest of the season. We don't know what Devin Leary's shoulder injury is. We saw Karin Bay go out with an injury.
It's not a collarbone, right? Or do we know that?
No, it doesn't seem like it's again.
Yeah, that was a relief to me actually when I saw him come out in this kind of sling he did, because I'm like, okay, maybe. I mean, it still could be bad. I'm not saying it can't, but a collarbone, you're done for the year. Like that's it. Maybe
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's a serious enough injury. But again, as of 9:19 this morning, I haven't seen any particular updates on that. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
So do they have to find a quarterback? Do they have a quarterback on their roster that they trust to pass that's not Thayer Thomas?
Well, see, that's the thing. And this is going to be interesting going forward because they went to Jack Chambers, who was a grad transfer. What's that?
Great story.
Great story, yeah, from Charleston Southern, right? Guy's like, he's at State for like his master's degree and stuff like that.
He's a walk-on.
He's 25 years old. He's a grown-ass man, okay?
Love it.
It's a great story. So, as I'm watching the game plan with Chambers in, where they don't want him to throw the ball, I actually started to think of a conversation that Chilio and I had over the last couple of weeks about Tim Beck, their offensive coordinator. And that my point with Tim Beck has simply been he's just kind of working with what he's got, with the wide receiver group. A lot of NC State fans were my mentions last night said they got to open up the playbook. And do what exactly when they open up the playbook?
And this isn't meant as a knock on Tim Beck necessarily. But State fans, I don't know that you want him to open up the playbook because usually, this is my one critique of him. Whenever he breaks out a trick play, I'm always baffled at the timing of it. It always seems like the obviously wrong time. Like where I'm thinking as it's developing, I'm like, surely they're not. And then they do. And I'm like,
And they do.
Like they even had some offensive momentum and they tried one of those yesterday with the Thayer Thomas trick, passing the ball. And I'm like, what do you, and then the series I think almost blew up on them basically at that point. And it's like, why? Why?
Plus, we have to have an honest conversation about what this team is made up of. The offensive line has regressed a little bit, so that they're not showing you confidence in the offensive line to get you a first down on 2nd and 2 or 3rd and 1.
No.
And again, you have to watch what you have and how they're thinking, and that's the best play I can think of. And while they end up trying to create basically a run game out of their screen passes. And then we have to be honest about the ceiling of the wide receiver group. We talked about this going into the Clemson game. And if the Clemson game did not make it abundantly clear that NC State is actually rather easy to cover given that their wide receivers cannot create consistent separation. Like, Torrey Holt ain't walking through that door, guys. Corey Robinson is not riding a dolphin to Carter Finley Stadium to help you out. Like, this is kind of the group.
It's so puzzling to me though, because every single one of those, like every now and then, like Lassane made a catch. You
He made
see
a
Devin
great catch.
Carter make a
Yes.
catch, and Porter Brooks is still. I mean, you sit there and you're like, okay, those guys are still on the roster, right? Like, I'm not crazy. I saw those guys play well last year. Like, is it just the offensive line? Have they regressed? Like, I don't know the answer to it, but
They just can't consistently do it. They just can't consistently do it, which gets us to Tim Beck and Chambers. And Jilly, you know, when I brought this up, Jilly always brings up the 2020 pandemic season, where Beck was probably at his most creative. And I was thinking to myself, well, what was it about the 2020 season that made it so? Bailey Hockman protocol. Here was a quarterback that they did not trust to throw it consistently, and they got creative, and they found ways to move the ball.
Is it
and
legal?
That's what we saw. That's what we saw late in the game. That's what we saw. That's what we saw in the fourth quarter with Chambers.
Can they add Paul Johnson as an offensive consultant and just start running triple or something? Like, or I mean, not really, but can they just suddenly start like running a run heavy offense at this point? Because
maybe.
I mean, that would be cool. Like, it reminded me slightly of that. I don't remember what year it was, but the Panthers beat the Falcons one time on like Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve or something like that, with like basically running the Wildcat for an entire game. And I'm like, oh, that's what's happening, because they didn't complete a pass after Leary went out. 0 pass completions, and they won. So
they still just move the ball, pile of dust, kick field goals, and rely on their defense. It's not the worst way to win a football game.
No, it's really not. It's. I mean, you could do worse. Honestly, yeah. Like at a certain point, I know Florida State's offense is really sputtering, and State's defense is playing really well. But at a certain point, I was kind of like, listen, props, because y'all figured out a way to make it work, and it didn't blow up in anybody's face.
So a couple surprises before we get out of here. I was surprised that Virginia could not take advantage of Malik Cunningham being out against Louisville. They're just toast. Virginia Tech found another interesting way to lose with Pitt's running back, 6 touchdowns in that game? 6?
320 yards and 6 touchdowns. Are you freaking kidding me?
Unreal.
Virginia Tech had allowed 5 rushing touchdowns all year going into that game.
And then you've got Georgia Tech Duke. And I do not know what to make. Duke's still feisty. You know how I feel. We're kind of judging Duke a little bit differently.
Yeah, it was a perfect storm of bad things happening to them, best I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, there was an ejection for targeting. They still
Hayward, you can't lose him.
They still make, they still made a game out of it there. They almost had a chance to tie it late. And
they did tie it. They went to overtime.
No, that's right. They did go to overtime.
Well, because I kept checking, and I'm like, what's happening?
I'm a little tired. Tired on this one.
And it was on Valley, so,
there's
most
that
of
too.
you couldn't watch it.
Regardless, it sets up, I still think, offensively, Duke can... We could have a basketball score in a UNC Duke football game.
Yeah, that's true. Although let's always remember that whenever we expect certain things to happen in the Coastal, they don't. I mean, people were saying over under Miami Carolina was like 66. Oh, they're like, oh, easy over. Well, didn't quite get there, So who knows what's going to happen? It'll be interesting. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea which version of UNC will show up. And it'll be interesting to see Duke's defense, I think. Like, we know their offense has moved the ball. Their defense seems to have been a little more inconsistent. Can Carolina, do what they've done? But we saw the offense struggle a little bit yesterday at times. Miami is obviously a little more talented, I think, on defense. It sounds weird to say, like, Miami's defense is really good if they don't have a coverage bust. I mean, not really good, but it's solid. They bust coverage. The problem is they have like 2 or 3 a game. Like, that's how they lost to Middle Tennessee State. And we saw that with Carolina. They had a couple coverage busts, and you can't have those against Drake May. He will make you pay with 7.
Don't down with the candles. Okay.
I know. And listen,
I'm not saying you.
The thing is, that was Drake May's worst game of the season, and they still won. And they still arguably won because of the offense. So, I mean, I think you'll take that at that point.
Also, happy Hispanic Heritage Month, kids.
Oh.
The NFL not realizing that the Spanish alphabet has an actual N.
Oh, my God.
They actually has an N, and the Enye is its own letter.
Did you read the why that they did it?
Oh, yeah. It's like the most cliche thing ever with, like, it adds the flavor and everything else. And it's like, if I say Latin flavor, what does that mean to you?
Does it mean the Enye?
Well, like,
That's
do people think like all Latin flavor is like Chipotle? Like, is it like Cubans don't do that, right? Just saying.
No. Oh no.
Cubans don't do spicy. Puerto Ricans don't do spicy.
Not really.
Just saying.
No.
If anything, if you wanted to honor that Hispanic, you basically turn that into like a little pig, like a little lechon. You put like a little pork leg right there, and you're good to go. Or maybe some maduros. I have no idea. That's how you do Hispanic.
Make the shield into a tostone.
Yes, absolutely. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We will see you all later.